Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room. No one is speaking. Nothing is happening. But your heart is pounding, like you're about to be ambushed. The air feels thick, like it's pressing in on you. A simple sound, a chair creaking, someone clearing their throat makes your entire body flinch. You laugh it off. You always do. You tell yourself you're just a little jumpy or overthinking again. But deep down, you know something else is operating behind your reactions. Something old, something ancient, something not entirely yours, but now a part of you. And then the strangest thought crosses your mind. What if this is your personality? What if the very way you walk into a room, the people you're drawn to, the love you think you deserve, the tone you adopt in conversations, what if none of that is truly you? What if it's all a defense system built to survive pain? You don't even consciously remember. You were not born cautious. You learned to be. You weren't born self-sabotaging. You were taught to believe that joy is temporary and safety is suspicious. You didn't come into this world afraid of being seen. You learned that visibility made you a target. We often think of trauma as an event, a moment, a wound. But what if that's not the full truth? What if trauma isn't just something that happened to you? What if it's something you became? What if trauma isn't the scar, but the lens? Think about the way you react to rejection, not just in love, but in life. How one critical comment from a stranger can ruin your whole week. How praise feels like a setup. How you try to control everything because chaos once taught you that letting go means destruction. Now ask yourself, how much of what you call your personality is actually a survival strategy? Maybe you're funny because humor was your only shield. Maybe you're low maintenance because asking for your needs got you punished. Maybe you're independent because dependence felt like abandonment waiting to happen. And if that's true, who are you underneath all that? Is there a you beneath the armor? We're told to just be ourselves, as if that self is always intact, untouched, unbroken. But what if your self was built on top of a battlefield, reconstructed with the debris of moments you never healed from? What if the you show the world is a fortress, not a home? How do you tell the difference between your true nature and your coping mechanisms? You might say, but I'm just like this. I've always been like this. And that might be true. But what if what feels like your deepest truth is actually the oldest lie you've been told about safety? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But what if the unconscious doesn't just direct your life? What if it becomes your life? The memories you bury don't disappear. They reorganize. They repurpose themselves. They embed into your habits, your preferences, your tone of voice, the look in your eyes when someone gets too close. Trauma doesn't end with the event. It continues in your identity. And here lies the most disorienting paradox of all. The thing you most want to escape your pain may now be the very thing holding your identity together. You don't just fear healing, you fear disappearing if you heal. Because if your trauma built your personality, then who will you be without it? Would your voice sound different? Would your posture change? Would your relationships collapse or finally begin? Would you still like the same things? Or realize they were just rituals to numb the ache? The mind adapts in brilliant, terrifying ways. It turns chaos into routine, pain into pattern, and it convinces you that this pattern is who you are. So now the question emerges not as a gentle curiosity, but as an urgent riddle that claws at your sanity. What if the person you've worked so hard to become was never really you? What if you've spent your whole life polishing armor instead of healing the wound underneath it? What if your personality is just a beautifully camouflaged trauma response? And if that's the case, can you even trust your instincts anymore? Can you tell the difference between intuition and hypervigilance, between love and familiarity, between peace and numbness? You don't have to answer yet, but sit with the question. Let it haunt you a little. Let it pull the ground out from beneath your assumptions, because the truth doesn't come gently. It arrives like a mirror you can't look away from, and once you see it, you'll never be able to unsee it. Now, let's peel back the layers and explore how this hidden force begins to shape who you are. If this content touched something in you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your support means more than you know. Thank you for being here. It begins long before you know the word trauma. Before you can explain pain, before you can even speak. It begins the moment something breaks your trust in the world. And instead of healing, you adapt. Your body tenses. Your nervous system memorizes your mind, begins building walls you don't even know are there. And from that moment forward, your entire sense of self is no longer shaped by possibility, but by protection. You grow up, but the defenses stay. They evolve, mature, even gain charm. People compliment you on your independence, your sensitivity, your drive. But they don't realize what you had to survive to become that way. This is the tragedy Carl Jung pointed to when he spoke of the shadow, the part of ourselves we repress, hide, or deny, because it was once unsafe to express it. The shadow isn't just your anger or fear. It's your tenderness, your need for connection, your capacity to trust, banished not because they were wrong, but because they were too dangerous to keep exposed. And here lies the hidden architecture of trauma. The self you present to the world is often built to keep the world out, not out of hatred, out of necessity. You learned that showing too much of your real self led to punishment, rejection, or abandonment. So you became a version of yourself that could survive. But survival has a cost. You start living inside a personality that feels like you, but isn't truly yours, and worse. The longer you wear that personality, the more it solidifies. Trauma becomes a sculptor, and you become its masterpiece, and no one notices, because it's all so normal. That's the insidious genius of this process. It hides itself behind socially acceptable masks. People praise your perfectionism. They admire your emotional control. They envy your self-reliance. But what they don't see is that beneath every compliment lies a wound. Nietzsche once wrote, "Every profound spirit needs a mask, even more. Around every profound spirit, a mask is continually growing." He wasn't just speaking of deception. He was describing a survival tactic. Masks protect, but masks also isolate. The real danger is not that trauma changes you. It's that it convinces you the change was your idea. You start defending your coping mechanisms as personality traits. You say things like, "I just don't do vulnerability. I'm not the emotional type. I prefer solitude. I hate conflict. I don't trust easily." But you don't realize these aren't truths. They're scars rehearsed so often they sound like identity. And the deeper problem, we live in a world that rewards the performance of strength, not the pursuit of healing. So we keep performing. You get promoted for never breaking down. You get liked for being agreeable. You get loved for being a low maintenance. And slowly you become less and less yourself because the real you was too complex, too demanding, too human to be tolerated. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and renowned psychiatrist, once observed, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. But pleasure is not the only escape. We also escape into personality. We construct identities that keep us busy. We become the helper, the intellectual, the comedian, the rebel. Each role a strategy, each label a disguise. Not because we are liars, but because the truth was too painful to live out. We stop asking who we are and start asking how to be safe. And so we stop growing. Because here's what trauma does that is rarely talked about. It freezes development. The parts of you that were shamed, neglected, or hurt stop evolving. They stay stuck at the age of impact. So while your body ages and your achievements grow, part of your psyche still trembles like a child who was never comforted. This is not a metaphor. Neuroscience backs this. The amygdala, your brain's fear center, does not have a sense of time. When triggered, it reacts as if the original threat is happening right now. And unless the trauma is processed, your nervous system stays looped in a past that never ended. Your reactions become overreactions. Your relationships repeat old wounds. Your dreams feel blocked, and you don't know why. You think you're broken. But the truth is more subtle and more terrifying. You're organized around your pain. Your brain has restructured itself to keep you safe. Your thoughts filter danger. Your beliefs filter betrayal. Your emotions filter survival. Everything is optimized not for joy, but for endurance. This isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility, because now you're an adult. And adults can do something children never could. They can confront the past with clarity. But clarity doesn't come easily. Arthur Schopenhauer, the grim philosopher of suffering, once said, "A man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills." In other words, you didn't choose your trauma. You didn't even choose how it shaped you. But now, you can choose whether to stay shaped by it. But here's the catch. Letting go of trauma means letting go of the personality it created. And that's terrifying, because no one tells you this part. Healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about risking the loss of who you thought you had to be. And that's why so many people stop here. They fear that healing will leave them exposed, naked, undefined. Because without your armor, you're not sure what's left. But what if that uncertainty is the doorway to freedom? What if the parts of you that feel undefined are not broken, but finally free to become? What if your fear of losing yourself is actually the fear of finally meeting yourself? This is not a comfortable realization, but it's a necessary one. Because until you can see the shape of your pain, how it curls into your habits, your words, your relationships, you will keep calling it you, and you will keep mistaking survival for identity. Now, it's time to look deeper into the invisible consequences of living a life sculpted by wounds. You wake up, you make coffee, you go to work, you talk to friends, you text your partner, you laugh at the right times, say the right things. On the surface, life flows. But beneath that surface, something is off. Subtle, silent, inescapable. Like an echo that doesn't belong to this room, but to another long ago. You can't name it, but you feel it in the way you hesitate before trusting, in the way joy feels like a setup, in the way calm makes you uneasy, like silence before a storm you can't predict. This is what trauma does when it's been left alone. Long enough it stops screaming. It settles. It doesn't just live in your body anymore. It builds systems, structures. It embeds itself into your logic, your instincts, your sense of what's normal. And that's when it becomes most dangerous, because now it doesn't feel like trauma. It feels like personality, like reality. You say things like, I don't trust people easily, or I hate conflict, or I prefer being alone. But what if that's not a truth, but a consequence? What if trauma didn't just wound you? It rewrote the rules of your life. Let's look closer. You find yourself constantly attracted to unavailable people. You don't know why. You tell yourself you like a challenge or independence. But what's really happening? Your nervous system is replaying an old story. It's not seeking love. It's seeking familiarity, because the human brain is not wired to seek what is healthy. It is wired to seek what is known, even if the known is pain. This is why some people can grow up in chaos, then unconsciously recreate that chaos in adulthood and call it home. This is why you might sabotage good relationships, why peace feels boring, why happiness feels suspicious. Because trauma doesn't just haunt you, it trains you. It teaches you that safety is unpredictable, that love is conditional, that expression equals danger. And your brain, ever the loyal servant, adapts. It floods you with cortisol when someone gets too close. It numbs you out when you're overwhelmed. It disconnects your body when things feel too real. This is no longer about an old wound. It's about an entire operating system. And the scariest part, it's efficient. It works. You're surviving. You're managing. You're functional. But functional is not the same as free. Let's talk about that. Functional trauma is the state in which you appear okay, successful, stable, high-performing, while your internal world is ruled by unhealed wounds. You overwork to avoid feeling. You overthink to avoid vulnerability. You overgive to avoid abandonment. You overcontrol to avoid helplessness. And no one calls it trauma. They call it personality. They say you're just really driven. You're such a people pleaser. You're so independent. But these are not neutral traits. They are coping adaptations. And they come at a cost, a constant hum of anxiety beneath stillness, a persistent fatigue that no amount of rest touches, a quiet sadness in moments that should feel full, a chronic sense of not being fully alive. You begin to notice it in moments that should feel good. You get the job and immediately worry if you can keep it. You find love and immediately fear losing it. You take a break and feel guilt instead of rest. This is the inheritance of unexamined trauma. It robs the present by dragging the past into it, and it goes deeper, because the longer you live like this, the more trauma calcifies, not just in the mind, but in the culture. We build societies around suppression, reward people for shutting up and performing, celebrate overwork, perfectionism, emotional detachment. We call it professionalism, ambition, discipline, but in truth, it's often mass dissociation. As Aldous Huxley once warned, the real hopeless victims of mental illness are to be found among those who appear to be most normal. In other words, We've created a culture where adaptation to trauma is not just invisible, it's encouraged. And it doesn't stop with individuals, it spills into systems. We elect leaders who mirror our inner wounds. We design education around obedience, not curiosity. We medicalize emotion and reward disconnection. We label sensitivity as weakness, stillness as laziness, softness as failure. And so trauma becomes self-replicating. It hides behind strength. It speaks in the language of logic. It dresses itself in the clothes of self-improvement. But it's not growth, it's camouflage. Here's the bitter paradox. The more you ignore your trauma, the more power it has. The more power it has, the more it feels like fate. And the more it feels like fate, the more you shape your identity around it, until your entire life becomes a response, not a creation. You're not choosing your life, you're repeating it. And that's not your fault. But it is your turning point. Because now you've seen it. Now, you feel the pattern pulsing behind your decisions. Now, you hear the echo of old wounds in your everyday thoughts. Now, you sense the cost of mistaking survival for identity. And once you see the pattern, you have a choice. You can continue to perform your personality like a role you never auditioned for, or you can start to dismantle it, brick by brick, belief by belief, habit by habit. But this isn't a gentle process. It will feel like a betrayal, like tearing down a home only to discover it was a prison all along. But that's where all real transformation begins. Not in comfort, not in clarity, but in collapse. Because only when the old self dissolves can the real self begin to emerge. And so the question is no longer, what happened to you? It's what have you built around it, and are you willing to let it go? Because the life that's waiting for you is not built on trauma, it's built on truth. And truth starts with rebellion. At first, it won't feel like freedom. It will feel like loss, like betrayal, like death. Because to truly break free from trauma-formed identity, you don't just heal, you unbecome. You stop being who you had to be. You stop pretending to be fine. You stop organizing your existence around safety and start flirting with the terrifying possibility of authenticity. And that's where the rebellion begins. Not with rage, not with fire, but with the most dangerous question you can ask yourself. What if I don't want to survive like this anymore? What if the hyper-independence isn't strength, but exile? What if the silence you keep in relationships isn't peace, but a fear of abandonment? What if your achievements are stacked on top of a wound that keeps whispering, you're only worthy if you perform? This is not self-help. This is war, an inner war, between the self you constructed to survive and the self that's begging to breathe. And the first step in this rebellion, doubt. Doubt every trait you've been praised for. Doubt the beliefs you inherited from pain. Doubt the behaviors that feel like second nature because they might be rehearsals, not instincts. Start asking questions that make your ego shake. Who taught me that vulnerability is weakness? When did I first believe I had to earn love? Who benefits from me staying quiet, staying small, staying agreeable? Because healing isn't about becoming a better version of your coping mechanisms. It's about realizing they were never you to begin with. And when you start peeling back those layers, you'll feel exposed. You'll want to run. You'll want to glue the mask back on. But don't. Stay with the discomfort. Because beneath every coping strategy is a need. And beneath every need is a wound. And beneath every wound is the real you. Let's talk about that for a moment. There is a version of you untouched by trauma. unshaped by fear, unashamed of being whole. That version isn't found, it's remembered. And to remember it, you have to rebel against everything that numbed you into forgetfulness. That means letting go of your role in your family. It means risking rejection for the sake of honesty. It means creating boundaries where there used to be guilt. It means saying no, even when your nervous system screams that you'll be abandoned. It means, in short, disappointing everyone who benefited from your suppression. But here's what no one tells you. Your healing will inconvenience people who were comfortable with your pain, and that's okay, because this is your life, not their expectation. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But here's the twist. Your why is buried under the who you were never allowed to be. So the rebellion isn't just about healing. It's about becoming not someone new, but someone real. And you won't do this through willpower alone. You'll need practices, rituals, truths that act like weapons in this war against unconscious living. Let's name a few. 1. Radical self-honesty. No more sugarcoating your patterns. No more pretending your pain is personality. Ask yourself every day, am I acting from truth or from trauma? 2. Nervous system. Work your mind won't heal what your body still perceives as danger. Breathwork, somatic therapy. Even just learning to stay in your body when discomfort arises, that's where rewiring begins. 3. Grief. You must grieve the version of yourself who coped the best they could. You must honor them, mourn them, then let them go. 4. Inner reparenting. Become the parent you never had. Speak to your fear, your shame, your guilt, as if it were a child because it was a child, and it still lives inside you waiting to be held. 5. Choose aliveness over approval. Every time you tell the truth instead of people, please, a part of your soul returns home. Every time you disappoint someone in order to honor yourself, you reclaim your life. 6. Witness, don't judge. When old patterns arise, don't shame them. Watch them. Understand them. Because you can't heal what you hate. And most importantly, 7. Reclaim the right to joy. You are allowed to feel good without earning it. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be seen not just as useful, but as worthy. This is not a straight path. You will regress. You will question. You will grieve things you didn't even know you lost. But you will also remember. You will remember the sound of your real voice, the weightlessness of laughter not used to deflect, the power of desire unchained from guilt, the beauty of stillness without shame. And that memory is the beginning of a new life. Because healing isn't just relief from pain. It's the return of self, and it's messy, and it's holy, and it's yours. So rebel, not for vengeance, but for truth. Rebel against a world that told you survival was your only option. Rebel by choosing to live, not just exist. Because on the other side of that rebellion is not just healing, it's revelation. There's a silence that comes after the storm. Not peace, not yet. Something quieter, deeper. Like the moment after a scream when the echo fades and all that remains is the truth. And here it is. You were never broken. Yes, you adapted. Yes, you built walls. Yes, you mistook pain for personality and armor for identity. But underneath it all, something remained untouched, uncorrupted. unkillable. Your essence, the part of you that knew something was off, even when the world told you it was normal. The part of you that hurt not because you were weak, but because you were still alive inside. The part of you that kept whispering, "This isn't me," even as you played the roles to survive. That whisper is you. And now, after all the grief, the unraveling, the rebellion, here's the ultimate truth. Your trauma didn't destroy you, it disguised you, but you were always there, waiting to be remembered. And that realization changes everything. It reframes your past not as a tragedy, but as initiation. Not as proof of your damage, but of your resilience. Not as a prison, but as a path. Yes, it shaped you. But it didn't define you. Because here's the paradox that breaks open the soul. The parts of you that feel most damaged are often the ones most capable of transformation. Why? Because suffering opens what comfort keeps closed. Pain strips away illusions. It exposes what matters. It teaches you to see truly, see the difference between performance and presence, fear and instinct, silence and peace. In suffering, you meet yourself, raw, unvarnished, uncomfortable, but real. And once you meet that version of yourself, the one underneath the pain, no mask will ever fit the same way again. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not to invent yourself, not to polish an image, but to return to what was true before the world told you who to be." This is not the kind of truth you frame in quotes and forget. It's the kind that reorders you. Because once you see it, you realize every flaw you hated was once a survival tool. Every weakness was a cry for love. Every failure was your soul refusing to settle for a false life. And now, you stand in the ashes of your former self, not ruined, revealed. There's no going back, not because the past has changed, but because you have. You no longer want to be liked for your mask. You want to be loved in your truth. You no longer seek safety in suppression. You seek liberation through expression. This is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. Wholeness doesn't mean you erase your wounds. It means you integrate them. You make peace with them. You honor them, not as identity, but as evidence of your evolution. And in that wholeness, something strange begins to happen. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop needing to chase healing as a project. You stop needing to over-explain your worth. Because, and that knowing radiates. People can feel it. It's in the way you speak without shrinking. In the way you hold eye contact without fear. In the way you walk into rooms no longer asking for permission to exist. You become magnetic, not because of performance, but because of presence. You are here, fully, unapologetically, finally, and maybe that's what healing really is. Not a return to innocence, but a rise into sovereignty. You don't just get your life back. You get something better, yourself. And this self isn't afraid of discomfort. It welcomes it as a teacher. This self isn't obsessed with being understood. It's committed to being real. This self doesn't need validation because it remembers who it is. You are no longer running. You are remembering. And in that remembrance is power. Not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet, unshakable kind that comes from having met your own darkness and chosen to stand in the light anyway. That's what makes you powerful. Not that you avoided pain, but that you used it to wake up. So now the final paradox: your trauma didn't ruin you. It revealed the exact wounds you were born to alchemize. And in doing so, it gave you your path, because your path isn't random. It's encoded in your scars. It's shaped by the very things you thought disqualified you. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are exactly where you need to be to begin again. Not as a version of who you were told to be, but as a mirror of truth. A voice for those still trapped in their masks. A beacon for those still confusing survival for identity. So the final invitation is this: stop polishing your trauma. Start embodying your truth. And when the world asks who you are, don't answer with a title, a trait, or a role. Look them in the eye and say, I am what survived and then chose to rise. Let them feel that. Let you feel that. Because this is not just the end of the script. It's the beginning of a new story. Your story, finally lived in truth. You are no longer running. You are remembering. And in that remembrance is power. Not the loud performative kind, but the quiet, unshakable kind that comes from having met your own darkness and chosen to stand in the light anyway. That's what makes you powerful. Not that you avoided pain, but that you used it to wake up. So now the final paradox: your trauma didn't ruin you. It revealed the exact wounds you were born to alchemize. And in doing so, it gave you your path. Because your path isn't random. It's encoded in your scars. It's shaped by the very things you thought disqualified you. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are exactly where you need to be to begin again. Not as a version of who you were told to be, but as a mirror of truth. A voice for those still trapped in their masks. A beacon for those still confusing survival for identity. So, the final invitation is this: stop polishing your trauma. Start embodying your truth. And when the world asks who you are, don't answer with a title, a trait, or a role. Look them in the eye and say, I am what survived and then chose to rise. Let them feel that. Let you feel that. Because this is not just the end of a video. It's the beginning of your return. And if this spoke to you, if something deep inside whispered yes as you listened, don't let it fade. Let it root. Leave a comment below, even just one word rising, so others know they're not alone. And if you know someone who's still mistaking their pain for personality, share this with them. It might be the mirror they've been waiting for. This is how we heal. Together, by remembering and reminding each other.